audio. Does it work?
Yeah, we can hear you. Well, I've got 10:30, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Work sessions are an opportunity. Work sessions are an opportunity for board members to discuss issues informally with staff and invited guests. The board encourages members of the public to attend work sessions and listen to the discussion, but there is generally no opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do so during the board's regularly scheduled meetings held twice monthly. We'll start with the county manager update. And County Manager Don Boone.
Thank you, Chair Quayla, members of the board. Good morning. Just a couple of updates. I had the opportunity with Scott Spence, the city manager of Astoria, to meet with Paul Lewicki, who's the interim director over at Sunset Empire Transportation District, and just to get an update from the district about how they're doing. I think part of what our conversation was about is making sure that they knew that we were here to assist and to be a resource as they continually address some of the challenges that they've been facing over the last couple months. So, and they've already taken us up on some assistance. So I see that as a positive. So we'll continue to work that. The other is that I had a follow-up meeting with Charter Communications. That's as a result of a presentation that Charter made at a recent board meeting about their RDOF, which is the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund investments that they're making within Clatsop County. And the one area that wasn't being served specifically as part of the RDOF dollars was that area that we've been working hard on, which is the Jewel, LC, Vine Maple, and then the Sunset Corridor as it heads east out of the county. And so we had a great meeting about that. We're having another meeting Monday. We're getting into very specifics, and they see the wisdom of them investing some additional time and energy in that area with us as a partner. And so we just have to work through all the details. We know what that could culminate in is a request from the county to earmark some of the ARPA dollars that were already earmarked for that area to Charter, or depending on how big of a lift is, it could be feeding an application for the state broadband grant program. So either way, we've had some really good discussions. Besides that area, much or really most of the county will be covered with a lot of the other investments that have been made. So just want to share that. Just want to remind the board too that the work sessions on August 9th and the 16th have been canceled. So just that summertime slowdown. So we'll still have the night meeting on the 9th. So we'll still be meeting in regular session. And then I did want to mention real quick that the county was recognized with an award, and this has to do with the Westport improvements for the boat ramp. The state's organization for boating access is making a national recognition of the Westport project, and the president's award is given to an agency, group, or local government for a recreational boating facility that is judged to be innovative, useful, high quality, unique, and economical. So I just want to recognize our public works folks, our parks folks, Steve Meshke, the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, for all the work that they did on that facility. It's a gem of a facility out in Westport. So just want to recognize that. Steve will be going to the conference and receiving that award in August. So, and that's all I have, Chair.
Well, that is exciting, and congratulations to the Parks team and to the Public Works team for all of their efforts. And on behalf of the County Commission, please pass along our appreciation for all that hard work, and of course the hard work of the staff on those two very important issues that you mentioned prior. That our proactive approach with Sunset Transit, I think, is extremely important, and of course working with Charter to get service to as many parts of our county is very important as well. So thank you so much, County Manager. Appreciate the report. We'll move on to the next item, which is the EFU zone procedures for alteration, restoration, or replacement of a lawfully established dwelling. Page 3 of our agenda. And Ian Sisson, our senior planner, is with us. Ian.
Thank you, Chair Quila. Good morning, commissioners. So I have a proposed law duck amendment for you this morning to review. And as Chair Quila said, this is for how we handle permit applications for altering, replacing, or restoring dwellings that were lawfully built in the EFU zone, the exclusive farm use zone. So currently that process, that permit is a type 2 use, which is a conditional use permit. The fee is $1,200, and the review and issuance of that permit can take 6 to 12 weeks. So it's a relatively expensive and cumbersome process where staff has determined that the Oregon revised statutes that apply can pretty reasonably be evaluated under a type 1 procedure instead, and that they don't require us to use a type 2 conditional use process. So this proposal is simply to move this provision in the EFU zone from the section where it's listed as a type 2 use to the section where it would be listed as a type 1 use. So what that will mean for permit applicants is that instead of paying $1,200, having a public comment notice period and waiting 6 to 12 weeks for an approval, this is something that we could do within typically less than a week, and it will cost $85, and there's no public notice or comment period. So the same review will happen in terms of the standards that apply. So they'll still have to show that they are going to meet all those requirements, but the speed and the cost will be greatly reduced. So I am happy to answer any questions that you have about this. Assuming that you support it, we will be taking it to the Planning Commission at their next meeting, which is August 8th. And then assuming they also support it, you would see it the following day at your first meeting in August on the 9th for a first reading, and then again on the 23rd for a second reading and hopefully approval of the ordinance.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Appreciate the review and looking for efficiencies on behalf of the Community Development Department. I will turn it to Commissioner Banks for a question. Commissioner Banks.
I'm just curious if that this process with the FEMA biop and the flood zones and so on and so forth, like just an example, say there's a dwelling that needs to be replaced in Brownsmead on the original footprint of a home, say it was a fire or something like that. Does this simplify the process for those dwellings to be then rebuilt even though they are in a floodplain?
It would not change any of the floodplain regulations or that permit review process. That would still have to happen before we could approve a development permit.
Is there, I guess in this conversation, is there a methodology for us to simplify that process? I mean, Brownsmead is a floodplain. I mean, the majority of Warrenton is a floodplain. So is there a way or a lever that we can pull in order to simplify that process for basically a dwelling replacement, or say a Grange replacement, building replacement?
So the way we determine what permits are required is, what's required in the underlying zone. So in this case, the exclusive farm use zone. So this would again change it from a type 2 permit to a type 1 permit. And then any additional permits that might be required could come from the fact that there's a hazard overlay, such as a flood hazard overlay or a geologic hazard overlay. That's a separate part of the code that separately applies to that same project. So, so this proposal would only change what's required in the underlying zone. It wouldn't change anything that's required from the overlays, and specifically with the flood hazard overlay. As you're aware, we are required by FEMA to have a certain review process and development standards. And so as far as I'm aware, there's nothing that we could modify because again, we're required by FEMA to have that review process and hold those standards.
Commissioner Thompson.
Actually, Commissioner Toyoka was before me.
Okay, Commissioner Toyoka.
Thank you. I had some of the same questions as Commissioner Bangs, and the other to add on to that would be on the overlays. Is there any way to, I don't want to say challenge, but question some of the methodology of the overlays to help us out? Because if you look at some of the methodologies, how they came up with the overlays, it seems flawed. So is there any way to challenge that without walking the ground or even having them walk the ground to verify the overlay? And second, and most of all, I wanted to say, thank you, Ian and staff for, we've always talked about providing ways to facilitate and remove barriers, and this is a great step forward in that process. So I really appreciate that. But I just had that question about the methodology. Is there a way to challenge that?
There is. So for the flood hazard overlay, FEMA has a process for a letter of map change. So there's a process that is set out by FEMA where somebody can say, the mapping is not correct. Maybe there was fill that was added a long time ago and their modeling doesn't take that into account, or something else, because that modeling is somewhat generalized. And so there is a process people can go through to get the map changed, and get a determination from FEMA, and then we can take that and if they were to get a letter of map change for the area surrounding a dwelling in the EFU zone that says it's actually out of the flood hazard, then we would take that and we would allow them to bypass the floodplain development permit process. And same thing for the geologic hazards overlay. They would need to still work with a qualified geologist or engineering geologist to issue a letter that says there is no hazard that's present. And again, we would take that and we would issue a waiver to the geologic hazard permit requirement if that was the case.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because on that geologic hazard overlay, some of them, like for slide, there are areas that are just incredibly flat. But the LiDAR shows trees or whatever is giving false images. It seems like an undue burden on, residents to have to get a geologist to prove that, when if we could challenge some of their methodologies and how they came up with that overlay.
Right. Yeah. The only way that we have in the code right now is the waiver recommendation from a geologist or an engineering geologist to say that the mapping is not correct and the hazard's not there.
All right. Thank you, Ian. Appreciate you.
Yeah, good questions, Commissioner Toyoka. Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Ian, good job. As we've all said, the idea that we are going to increase the availability to create and repair housing, I think is a positive one. On the other hand, I'm aware that some of my neighbors and some neighbors in other parts of the county have a different point of view and look for a land use process to delay, to increase the cost, or to actually put the kibosh on housing. Do you know if there will be community pushback on this one?
Don't expect there to be pushback on this. From, during the time that I've been here, when we have been treating alteration, replacement, and restoration of existing dwellings that were lawfully established in the EFU zone, we've been sending these public notices out and having a comment period. I don't recall getting pushback on any of those applications that I've handled, or that others have processed. So I don't expect there to be in this case. And typically, EFU zone properties are going to be outside those urban fringe areas, and in much more, the development there is much more sparse. So no, I don't expect there to be too much pushback. And again, this is for improving existing housing stock that was lawfully established. It's not for developing new housing.
I'm just an abundance of caution, and I appreciate your reassurance. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Thank you, Ian. Do we have any other questions at this time? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on then to the next item, which is the geologic hazard permit exemptions. Senior Planner Ian Sisson again. Ian.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is another effort to make things a little bit easier on folks by allowing certain activities in the geologic hazards overlay to be exempt from a requirement to get a geologic hazard permit. And so, under statewide planning goal 7, we are required to regulate development in areas that have been identified as geologic hazard areas. And so we have this overlay district, which we just discussed earlier. But again, the effort there, the purpose of having that overlay is to minimize building hazards and threats to life and property that can be created by various different types of geologic hazards. And when we have reviewed some guidance from Dogami in the past, they have a guide called Preparing for Landslide Hazards, a land use guide for Oregon communities. They outlined sort of a model code and analyzed a bunch of codes from other jurisdictions around the state to look for, what does a good geologic hazard ordinance look like and have in it. And so one of the common elements, and one of the elements that was in the model, was a list of exemptions. And so the exemptions would be allowed for specific development activities that are considered to be lower risk and don't pose a threat to life or property. And it also includes things that are regulated by perhaps state or federal agencies. And so there's no reason for us to multiply the review process in those cases. So there is a list here proposed in your packet, and that was generated from the Dogami guidance and also from the code that Tillamook County has. And county just recently, over the last couple of years, updated their code and worked really closely with DLCD and Dogami. So we feel like this is a pretty good list. If there are any items that you think should be added or removed or changed, please let me know. And then the other thing that we're proposing to change here, again, to make things a little bit easier for folks, is that we would extend the period the geologic hazard reports are valid. They're currently only considered valid for 2 years in our code, and we would extend that to 5 years. And that's, again, consistent with the guidance from Dogami and what some of our peer jurisdictions have. So happy to answer any questions. And again, this, if there's support for this, we would be taking it to the Planning Commission August 8th and to your board on August 9th for a first reading of the ordinance.
Thank you, Ian. Any questions? Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, sir. Well, Ian, again, the same question. Do you anticipate community pushback from any sector? Ian, you're muted.
You're muted there.
Ian, you're still muted.
Still muted there, Ian.
Uh,
There you go. You got it. We can hear you.
I
yeah,
don't
no,
think
my
he is able to
headset's-
hear.
It's
Oh, his headphones. See, this is when we need ASL, right?
Can you hear me now?
yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. My headset just stopped working right when Commissioner Thompson started asking her question. So could you please repeat that?
Thank you, sir. Same as before. Do you anticipate pushback from any sector of our community?
I don't. So we brought some amendments to you a few months back on the geologic hazard overlay, and we had a public process and a survey that we put out, and there was generally support for including exemptions.
Thank you.
Any additional questions at this time? Commissioner Webb?
Yes, thank you. Ian, are you all doing any kind of a systematic review of Law Duck for these issues? Or are you all just responding to DLCD comments? Excuse me, I should have your work plan in front of me, but I don't. I'm not at my home desk. So I just wondered if these regular reviews is this part of another system that you all are doing?
So we will
work.
be doing a pretty systematic review of the Law Duck as a result of the updated comprehensive plan.
Mhm.
This is separate from that. We had identified the geologic hazards overlay as something that could and should be updated. We have outdated map sources from the late 1970s. We'd like to get those updated eventually. And then there were just other things that we had identified as sort of sticking points in the process for people. Again, the development activities that are low impact, low risk, especially, we've been getting pushback over the years from the public about having to go through a very extensive and pricey process to work with a geologist to do projects that are pretty simple. So this was one that we wanted to push forward just because it would help alleviate some of that and make things easier for people.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Senior Planner Ian Sisson, really appreciate your department's work to try to find efficiencies and work with customers and property owners within our county to make things easier. So appreciate that wholeheartedly, and thanks for all your efforts.
Thank you, Chair Quila. Thank you, commissioners.
Next item is the housing update. So we have Elisa Gertler, our housing manager, joining us. And I will go ahead and turn it over to her. Welcome.
Good morning, commissioners. It's nice to see you. And I am pleased to be able to come and give you an update on the county's work around housing production, affordability, and choice. As most of you know, I am just coming up on my 60 days as a county employee, and I've learned a lot about the county in the last 60 days and sort of what we have underway and how we can move forward. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and give you a PowerPoint to illustrate this. Let's see. Get it in slideshow. Is it a slideshow now? Can you, whoops. Can you all see that?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So what I wanted to talk about is sort of how we're going to approach housing at the county. And I wanted to talk about building a framework. My goal is not just to start doing things about housing, but to have it organized in a thoughtful framework. And one of the frameworks that has worked for me and that I'm bringing to this approach is sort of a values, outcomes, and actions framework. And so it really starts with the policy direction given by you guys, the commissioners, to talk about what values guide the work of the county around housing and what outcomes does the county want to see. And from those values and outcomes, we can, as staff, figure out what are the right actions that are appropriate for the county and what resources do we have to provide. So you're going to hear me refer to this values, outcomes, actions, and framework, values, outcomes, and actions framework. And when you think about the role of the county, one of the things I've been thinking of is sort of what is the right role of the county? What levers, what resources, what tools do we have to bring to bear, right? We're not an affordable housing developer. We're not a city government, but we do have tools at our disposal as a county that can facilitate things. And so just for the purposes of, poetic illustration, everything starts with a P. Partnerships, policies, programs, projects, productions, and of course, people. So I'm going to walk through sort of what we're working on in each of these areas and welcome your direction on all of it. So partnerships, I want to start with partnerships because I think this is actually one of Clatsop County's greatest strengths is how we work together with our partners and how our partners see us as somebody who can assist with building capacity and facilitating connections. And the county manager has talked about other ways that we're doing that in other areas. And I'm hoping to bring that same kind of discipline as a partner. Commissioner Toyuka, you're involved in the Regional Housing Task Force, and I believe the rest of the commissioners are also following that work. I think that's a great example of partnership where we're able to facilitate conversations about housing, not just between us and the local governments. There are school districts, healthcare providers, social service agencies, and a wide range of folks that are participating in the task force. And just having a shared table where we can discuss issues has been super valuable and provides us an opportunity to build on that. And then there's kind of two categories of partnerships that I've been working on. One is really working closely with cities. I believe one of the opportunities we have with my position at the county is just to increase the capacity of cities who are busy running their cities, doing their own community development work. So to be able to have a little bit more capacity on their ability to work on housing in particular. Many of you are, I think probably all of you are familiar with the property in Seaside that the county helped transfer to Seaside as part of our affordable housing work. I'm working closely with the city of Seaside to put together an RFP to seek a developer for that piece of property, and that will go out probably before the end of the year so we can have a developer in place to seek funding from the state next year. And then the other project that I've been working on significantly with the cities is Astoria is required by the state as the only city in the county to produce a housing capacity analysis and housing production strategy. But because of the great work of the Housing Task Force, there is a desire by all of the cities essentially to work together and come up with a regional focus on buildable lands, housing capacity, housing needs. And DLCD, some people will say it stands for don't like conflicting direction, but I'm not going to say that, but I just did. But the idea is working with DLCD does take some additional capacity. It has been a little confusing as they implement some of the new housing rules. And so we have submitted a grant application to DLCD to facilitate essentially a regional housing, land, and infrastructure inventory that will set Astoria up for its housing capacity analysis and production strategy. So that's been a great piece of work, and you'll be hearing more about that, assuming that we get the resources from the state and kick the project off. And we will be using the task force as our steering committee to make sure that everybody in the county is engaged. And then the other key area of partnerships is really how we've been working with our social service partners around homelessness and homelessness prevention. We have a great network of folks that you've heard about at your last work session in the MAC group who have put together a plan to address homelessness, are seeking state resources. I think most of you know we've purchased the Columbia Inn and are about to open the first shelter beds in the county at the Columbia Inn. And one of the other key pieces of work that's come out of this partnership around the homelessness work is the opportunity to share data among all of the homeless providers. So when you think about Clatsop Community Action and the Harbor, Lifeboat, and Helping Hands, each one uses a different way of collecting and managing the data about the people that are being served. But the opportunity to bring them together, as County Manager Bone talked about at last work session, is a huge opportunity. And so Assistant County Manager Monica Steele and I are working on some additional resources to actually get this data sharing work up and running. And I just have to say, coming from other parts of Oregon, the ability for providers to work together on sharing data around serving homeless populations is everybody's goal and a very difficult lift. And I think Clatsop County is actually going to serve as a model for the state in terms of how you interoperate each other's data to be able to really help people move through the system most efficiently, rather than they have to call 5 different providers to try to find what might be available and who might meet their needs. This data sharing is going to be not only better for the providers, but for the people we're serving as well. So you'll hear more about that over time as well. Okay, I'm going to move on from partnerships. I want to talk about the policy lever. In addition to the policies that you all passed, there are some opportunities for us to be influential, particularly at the state level. I believe most of you are aware that I got appointed to the Governor's Housing Production Advisory Council, which is a statewide group of 25 Oregonians, including agency heads and state legislators, working on basically making recommendations to Governor Kotek by the end of this year to facilitate her goal of 36,000 housing units being produced every year for the next 10 years. I'm serving on the Land Availability Subcommittee, which is significant for Clatsop County. That's about buildable lands, it's about infrastructure needs, it's about wetlands, urban growth boundary, et cetera. And I'm also serving on the Workforce Shortages Subcommittee, which is also a significant issue for us in terms of getting the workers we need here to be able to build the housing. And of course, one of our key issues is that there's no housing for the trades workers to build the housing. And so what I've learned in both of those committees is that there are some common themes that don't just affect Clatsop County. So the workforce shortages, for example, that committee is made of people from Ontario, Bend, Umpqua, and they all have similar issues. And so it actually elevates our voice to partner with other jurisdictions who have similar issues. So I will keep providing updates for you as that HPAC work continues. And it's our recommendations will go to the governor, and I believe her intention is to take the recommendations from this group to shape her agenda for the 2024 short session, which will be focused on housing and homelessness. And the county manager and I are working on how we might position ourselves for additional resources, of course, but if any of you have any feedback, we welcome it. And then the other piece I just wanted to mention is, because of the interest at the state level and frankly at the federal level in housing production and affordability, there is all kinds of legislation and policy that's being made in Salem, in Washington, D.C. Senator Merkley is very active. Congresswoman Bonamici is very active. And so part of my role is to just try to stay connected with them and make sure that as they are proposing, implementing, or funding any legislation, that the Clatsop County interests and needs are always front of mind and well represented. And of course, I'm working with the county staff who are working on legislative work as well. Programmatically, we have a few things that are really already underway, and I just wanted to mention sort of how the county tools around programs are affecting housing. Many of you have seen our web housing dashboard that keeps track of the housing production that's happening around the county. It has data, it has information. It's a resource of all the documents that we've created around housing. And that's being updated, working with staff on that, and trying to keep it so that it's a live and up-to-date resource, not just a moment in time. And working with the cities to make sure that every time they're processing new permit applications that they get onto the dashboard so that people can click and find out what's happening and where throughout the county on the dashboard. So frankly, there's opportunities to even make that more robust over time as we get additional information and do additional work. Programmatically, you guys are well aware of the Brownfields program that the county has, and we are working to deploy some brownfields assessment for a couple key housing projects in the county. One is the Seaside High School project that we talked about earlier, and the other one is the Copeland Commons project, which I believe most of you are also familiar with in downtown Astoria. Similarly, you have made commitments already around ARPA funds for pre-development, which you've built a programmatic umbrella for. I believe you just made the commitment to the Housing Authority for some funds for the Owens 2 project. We've just received at staff level a request for some funds for Copeland Commons that we'll be bringing to you shortly. And we anticipate potentially that we might also get a request from Clatsop Behavioral Health for what is currently known as the KFC project, but really needs a better name. Or at least a different, what KFC might stand for besides what it does now. So we have some programmatic umbrellas that we're bringing to the table as well. And then I just wanted to mention projects, because ultimately, you know, when we're talking about producing housing, we want to be able to point at this project and this project. And so there are a number of things underway, and I realized that I didn't actually put the KFC project on this list, but in Astoria, you know, there's a very low income project that's underway, the Owens 2. The Copeland Commons is in very early pre-development stages, but has a lot of community support and leadership. In Seaside, it's the high school site. I think most of you are also familiar with the Red Lion site that is being converted to both workforce and very low income housing. And I know you're also aware of that Fort Point project, which promises to bring quite a bit of workforce housing, which we all know is a significant gap for us, to Warrenton. And my hope is that in future presentations, this list will just grow longer and longer as we talk. One of the key things that we're working on in terms of production, right, where we're talking about how do we actually get land ready for housing, is following up on some of the work that's already been done to identify county property that might be suitable for housing development. And actually, I have been working with staff to take a look at the property that has already been identified. So including the ones that you've already discussed in places like Archgate, but also in Warrenton and Astoria, Seaside, and doing a GIS analysis that's a little bit deeper of a dive in terms of what is more suitable for housing. What are the right places that housing belongs, where the land is right, the infrastructure is right, the market is right, and the need and the access to services are right. So this is underway right now. I just got a draft map yesterday that I'm looking at, and as we identify additional properties that may be suitable, we'll come back and talk to the board about next steps. And so I wanted to also talk about the people, because we often in housing, we talk about number of units or buildings or land availability or infrastructure. But ultimately, when we're talking about housing, we're talking about the people that we're serving. And I deleted the logo from this work, so nobody will know where it came from, but it's not hard to figure out that it comes from the metro area. And what this is kind of a look at housing for whom across the spectrum. So if you look at this, you'll see, you know, who makes 30% of median family income. That could be, you know, a couple on Social Security. That could be an entry-level worker. It could be someone on disability. Then you move to that sort of 30 to 60% median family income. That could be a full-time worker at a childcare. It could be a preschool teacher. So you move along the income spectrum and you see that there's different demographic needs that we're serving. And so I'm hoping that ultimately we'll end up with a similar framework that shows that there are different strategies are needed at the 30%, the 60%, the market rate, the workforce housing, all the way up to, you know, the highest end where we also have a shortage of housing. And so just remembering that it's not about the units, it's not about the buildings, but that these are the people of Clatsop County at all different income levels, all of whom need a place to live. And so I added one more P, even though this isn't in my cute graphic at the front, and that's just potential, right? Having me on board, having your leadership, having Don's leadership gives us the opportunity to have potential to grow our capacity to produce housing. So I'm looking at identifying new funding resources, seeking additional partners in both the community and the development side to be able to do that, and ultimately the potential for new housing to be created. So this is this is the first 60 days of the outline of housing. And I welcome your questions, feedback, or any other thoughts you may have about where to go from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Housing Manager Gertler. Really appreciate the presentation. I see that Commissioner Thompson has a question. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, sir. Well, I was waiting with bated breath for you to say, are you ready for questions? Because you bring so much to add to our community, and I'm overjoyed that you're here. I think in my mind, what we're looking at is the next iteration, the next development of the functionality of the county coordinating with the work of the commissioners as we perform our liaison assignments. Commissioner Webb is part of the workforce board. Commissioner Bangs is part of Northwest Senior and Disabilities. We don't yet have a seat on the CCO board. I hope that we can move in that direction. I know the chair is interested in that as well as I am, and I think some other commissioners. I'm chair of the Community Action Agency, the CAT team, which operates low-income housing in Cannon Beach, the only low-income housing in Cannon Beach, and has several programs. So hope you'll coordinate with that. I'm chair of COLPAC, which is interested in those brownfield development issues and other kinds of economic development that will look not only at workforce, because Heather Dessart, the ED of NOEA, is part of that. And so we've got a robust series of relationships already in my mind. To the extent that you can work with us, you will enhance our functionality and yours to the benefit of the people and the housing in Clatsop County.
Thank you for mentioning COLPAC. I wanted to bring up that in the state legislature this last session, House Bill 3395 allocated funds to the economic development districts specifically for housing. And there's been quite a feeding frenzy anytime there's new money on the table in terms of how to allocate that. So I'm going to be meeting with staff at COLPAC to discuss with them how we might leverage those resources to accomplish what we're already trying to accomplish. And Commissioner Thompson, I'm sure we'll have more conversations about that as well.
Well, that's good, because I think today is the day that we're allowed to announce the new director, the new executive director of COLPAC, but I'm not going to do it until I'm absolutely sure. I will say that the person we selected has experience not only in planning and economic development, but also in working with ODOT, because the transportation network is part of that. And I'm chair of the Northwest Act and part of the Super Act, and on a couple of other statewide ODOT related committees. So as I'm glad you're talking to staff also, I want to see us integrated with the commissioners, because we can enhance what you're doing. You can enhance what we're doing. Thank you for all of it.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. That's exciting news. We'll look forward to hearing that announcement. Any other questions at this time? County Manager?
Chair Quill, I just want to, I want to thank Alyssa for all of her work in her first 60 days. Obviously, there was a lot of ripe opportunities and a lot of good work that was being done already, but to have her here to kind of be a galvanizing force as we go through this, and with her rich history, I know the county's going to benefit from it in a very unique way. We're also, just so your board knows, we're also working a lot on the data side regarding some of the homeless funds that are coming from the state. I certainly have my opinions when I look at the data, and we're going to be developing some infographic tools for your board, and at an upcoming work session, I will walk through that with Alyssa and with others, just so your board can really see the challenge that the county faces as we attempt to deal with what is really uniquely challenging issues at the coast, and specifically Clatsop County, and how the funding mechanisms right now don't reflect that challenge. And so I just want to share that there's another component to this, which is us making sure that we give your board the data and the perspective you need, so that, as Commissioner Thompson mentioned, you can do the work you do in that unique governing policy making side. And I just think there is going to be this ongoing storytelling that the county is going to be doing. So I just wanted to let your board know that there will be an agenda item soon to talk about that further. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, County Manager. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, sir. Just to play off what the county manager said, he and staff were able to give me a one-pager to distribute at the LGAC meeting last Friday. So I passed it out to the 15 members who sat around, including the interim director of the Oregon Health Authority. It was included as part of the minutes, and it was shown to the folks who were participating virtually. That's the kind of, the county manager's phrase is coordinated muscle movement. And we are having, that's the newer functionality, because if we can keep telling our story, then we as commissioners can be the ambassadors to seek the additional resources that staff can use so well to get the work done. Happy event.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Any other questions, comments? Again, Housing Manager Goodland, we really appreciate the presentation and all of the hard work. There's a lot going on on the housing front in Clatsop County, and it's great to have you in a position to kind of focus us and continue that progress. So welcome aboard, and thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners.
And that is the last item on our agenda. Do we have anything else to discuss? Commissioner Webb.
Could I introduce something that is not on our agenda that involves the state shutdown of their office in Astoria? I'm sorry, I'm not in town, but I've been very frustrated at the lack of DHS's ability to communicate with us, either the city or with the county, about the fact that they have been out of that building now for a couple of months and redistributing. Each department has kind of made their own arrangements for where their staff is. There has been no public dissemination of information about where to go for help. We know, for instance, that Children and Family Services folks have been welcomed into CBH's space, and that the trailers that you see outside of that building are OED trailers. So our workforce people are, at least they're in the best position, because when people come to that building, they are seeing that there is staff there. I think this was just a huge oversight. And I heard from David Reed just a few minutes ago about the fact that the state is now, the Human Services Director is a little embarrassed that they didn't bother to reach out to the county or the city of Astoria. And I think he should be very embarrassed by what has happened in the last 2 months, because they serve the most vulnerable people in our community. And those people have not been reached out to, and they have not been well communicated with. So I hope, Manager Boone, have you had any discussions with anybody about this issue?
So, Chair Quitla, appreciate the members of the board. I have not had any discussion with anyone from the state about it, but the city of Astoria and myself we have discussed it, and we are reaching out to the state to have a meeting with them so that we can learn more, because there's some parallels with some other issues we've been dealing with, which is the communication hasn't been timely and it hasn't been comprehensive with partner agencies. And so what Scott Spence, city manager of Astoria, and I have talked about is to reach out to the state and have a conversation, because we read in the newspaper, like many others, that the state was not intending to reoccupy the building. And so that's something new to us. And so we would like to talk with them and figure out, A, what is the current situational status, but then what is the plan, and then how can we them if there is an opportunity. And so I agree with Commissioner Webb, though there hasn't been any communication that I've seen from the state as they've been dealing with this issue. And I'm thinking about it from the client side. But there hasn't been that intergovernmental outreach either, which would be typically expected. And so we will follow up with the state and see if we can't get any clarity. And as soon as we have that, I'll be sure to share that information with your board.
Okay. I will send you, Manager Boone, I will send you the email that I got from David Reed this morning, who apparently attended some such meeting.
Mr. Reed and I were in a meeting this morning where this was discussed, and the city and I had discussed reaching out to the state. Again, we just found out kind of what that decision was in the newspaper. So
yeah. So I think that it was interesting at our last board meeting, Nicole Bales came up to me at the end of the meeting and asked who at the state I had been in touch with. And I told her that I had tried to be in touch all the way to the top and had not even been able to get the DHS regional person to return my phone calls. So I just think that's a pretty severe issue. So I'm glad you were at that meeting. So you sound like you're on it. Okay.
What if I could, Commissioner, I think that one of the unfortunate situations is that the county is always in a situation of trying to reach into another organization and asking them to communicate with us and to include us in their deliberations even, which would be common. It's just an unfortunate situation where we're reaching in to try to get information. And so we are happy to do that. I just want to share with your board how that's not typically the mode of operation. Usually it's much more an agency reaching out to the county and communicating. It's been an odd time recently where we have to ask people to partner with us on topics that are not central. They are definitely an interest of the county and a very important interest, but it's not something that we are in the driver's seat on. So we will do everything we can to try to open up communications with the state on this topic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Because it's one of those issues where, for instance, we started a week or so ago talking about the availability of office space throughout Clatsop County. And, these are services that can be provided probably, anywhere from Astoria to Seaside. And so that we would have to look to all of our chambers to help us find space. And we could have been doing that for the last 2 months if they had let us know that this was going to be a forever issue. In addition to which, I would assume that the city is going to have some issues about the fact that this looks to be a facility that has both ground soil contamination of some sort and also a building that occupies a lot of space in downtown Astoria that looks to be not a healthy environment. So it's a major public health issue. And I was very concerned that they hadn't even thought of calling public health for assistance on this. Anyway, sorry, that's my harangue for today, folks.
No, thank you, Commissioner Webb. Appreciate you bringing up the issue. Appreciate the county manager's efforts on outreach. And I think there's plenty of opportunities for more intergovernmental cooperation throughout our county and region. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, sir. And in speaking of cooperation, I didn't mean to omit you from your participation on NOHA. All of us commissioners are engaged all over. Thank you.
No, thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Any other comments before we adjourn? Okay, good to see everybody. Have a good rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.